the art of war. Sometimes you get more than what you bargain for. So what I'm saying is I feel you when you're feeling me, and naturally I'm open to the possibility.
I usually don't do this on the first night. Hold up, what you want me to do with that? Damn, I'm at it again.
They say the love's a battlefield, that's the art of war. Sometimes you get more than what you bargain for. So what I'm saying is I feel you when you're feeling me, and naturally I'm open to the possibility. Possibility. So what I'm saying is I feel you when you're feeling me, and naturally I'm open to the possibility. Let's go.
See yourself. You are the steps you take. You and that's the only way. Shake, shake yourself. Your every move you make. So the story goes.
I don't understand why half the world is still crying. Because as a matter of fact, as we discovered on the terrain, tomorrow never happens. It's all the same fucking day, man. I said, I understand. Honey, when I want to turn so high. But when everybody in the world wants the same damn thing. just because I got to need your love. I said, I don't understand. Honey, when I wanna try so hard. Honey, when everybody in the world wants the same damn thing. When everyone in the world needs the same.
You still ain't my boo. What can you do? Still reject you, disconnect you. What can you do? You still ain't my boo. What can you do? Still reject you, disconnect you. What can disconnect you? What can you do? To reality, oh, there goes gravity. You still ain't my boo. There goes gravity, show, he's so mad with you. What can you do? To reality, oh, there goes gravity. Still reject you, disconnect you.
Buenos días. Perdón, tenemos un poco de retraso con el último bus. I'm really sorry, we have a small delay with the last bus, so we are going to be 5 minutes late. Thank you.
Now everybody wants to get down like that. Hey, you, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Ah, yes, ain't that fresh? Now everybody wants to get down like that. Hey, you, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Ah, yes, ain't that fresh? Now everybody wants to get down like that. Hey, you, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Ah, yes, ain't that fresh? Now everybody wants to get down like that. Hey, you.
Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats so that we can start.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Welcome. Settle in, relax. We have an hour for this morning's plenary session. I'd like to first thank the Council of Europe for inviting us here. It's great to be here, and we really value the collaboration. Thank you. I'd like to make some quick introductions of the panelists in the order that they'll be appearing. First, we have Alexander Sager, who needs no introduction to this group, but he is the Executive Secretary of the Cybercrime Convention Committee, and he'll be talking about data safeguards in the convention and the second additional protocol. Followed by me. I'm David Satola from the World Bank, Lead Counsel, Technology and Innovation, and I'll be talking about the kind of holistic legal approach, legal environment, legal framework that supports this kind of work. We'll be followed by Sabine Bergs from Interpol, who's counsel in the Data Protection Office there, Interpol in Lyon, as opposed to her colleagues of Interpol from Singapore, who spoke yesterday. And finally, we have Maria Solange Maceo, who's the Director of Legal Studies Division of the Center of Research and Teaching in Economics from Mexico. We heard a lot over the last 2 days about the importance of data in combating cybercrime. In this session, we're going to take a slightly more focused look at the question of data, how it fits into combating cybercrime generally, how it situates with the broader legal framework that is evolving in countries. We'll be looking at personal data in particular, but not limited to that, because the question of data is more complex. As we have been speaking about it the last day or so, we referred mainly to data, but there are different kinds of data, personal data, non-personal data, et cetera. We also will be talking a little bit about how these concepts of use and reuse of data are emerging and evolving, and how good practice is emerging and evolving with them, and how that impacts combating cybercrime. Each of our panelists has about 10 minutes for their presentation. We will follow that with questions and answers, hopefully from the floor, and if not, then it is my prerogative as moderator to ask the questions. Please don't leave it to that. Please ask your own questions. And we're supposed to wrap up in about an hour. So with that, I turn it over to you, Alexander.
Thank you. Great to be in this panel and to be here with great friends and also enablers, people that will help us also in the future to make sure that we can assist countries around the world in strengthening their safeguards. The topic of this session is data protection as an enabler for cooperation. And this is also the logic of the data protection provision of the second additional protocol. The idea is that if the data protection requirements of this protocol are met, then data protection shall not be a ground to refuse cooperation. There may be other grounds for refusal that are defined in the protocol and so on, but if the data protection conditions of Article 14 are met, data protection shall not be a reason for preventing authorities to share data across borders, but also service providers and registrars, registries to share data across borders. That's the logic of the data protection provision of the protocol. As you know, and it's just a recap, the second additional protocol has a number of tools for more effective, more efficient cooperation, including direct cooperation with private sector entities in Articles 6 and 7. And then, in order to ensure that the safeguards are met, to have efficiency in tools, but also safeguards that ensure that rule of law and human rights and also data protection requirements are met, there are Articles 13 and in particular Article 14 of the protocol. But the protocol altogether has loads of safeguards built into each provision of the convention, from the scope of this protocol, specific investigations and criminal investigations and proceedings. It is not general activities or intelligence or national security activities. The differentiation of the type of data to be disclosed, the possibilities for reservations, declarations, and etc. We discussed this already earlier in our forum. So please study this book, including the text, the operative text of the Second Additional Protocol, and the explanatory report. This is also in this book of the Second Additional Protocol. Very important. In Article 14, you have a number. You have first, of course, the scope of the provision, and then you have a number of principles that are fairly specific that have to be implemented by the parties. No need now to go through the details, but I wanted to point out a few things here. In terms of the scope of application, so the starting point is that all the parties to this protocol will implement the principles of paragraphs 2 to 15 of this article. Okay, but there are two exceptions to that. One of them, there was a question raised in the earlier session, in the workshop that we had yesterday, or the day before yesterday. But there is also another exception. So if parties already have a comprehensive data protection agreement in place that is applicable between each other, they can use that agreement. They don't have to then refer to paragraphs 2 to 15 of this protocol. For example, and in the explanatory report, there are two examples that are given, but there may be others. If parties are already party to the Convention 108 plus of the Council of Data Protection, Convention 108 as amended some time ago, if they're parties to that, they would apply between each other Convention 108 plus. This is one example. The other example is that the United States of America has an agreement with the European Union. It's called the Umbrella Agreement. There is a longer title of that. It's known as the Umbrella Agreement. The European Union and the United States would also use that agreement to the extent that it's applicable. There are some discussions about whether cooperation with service providers, directly with service providers, fall under that agreement. But then that agreement is also under discussion, may also be amended, and then it would also apply. So if parties already have an agreement in place that is applicable, they use that. They don't have to refer to Articles 2 to 15. Another exception, and that's the one we discussed the other day, is if two parties agree between each other that they have been cooperating for a long time already, there's sufficient trust between the parties, let's say under mutual assistance agreements, they can also work under those agreements. And that's Article 1, Paragraph 1C that is listed there. Okay? So that's the logic here. The principle, you apply paragraphs 2 to 15, unless you make use of another agreement, a comprehensive agreement already that you're party to, or you have specific arrangements in place already for a long time that you can refer to. And then in paragraph 1D, the logic of this whole data protection system is there, that if these requirements are met, data protection is not a reason for preventing data flows. That's the whole idea. That's why Article 14 and the whole data protection system is here in this protocol. Then, of course, the question is, what happens how can we ensure that data protection requirements are met by the parties? And therefore, we have built in Article 23, an evaluation, an assessment. The whole protocol will be subject to assessment, but there's a specific reference that the data protection provisions of Article 14 will be assessed at a very early stage during this cycle of assessments under the protocol under Article 23. As you know, perhaps right now there are already assessments carried out of the convention by the parties to the convention. The next round is about to start in a few months. But that is an agreement between the parties. It's not in the convention. So currently in the convention, assessments are not mandatory. It's an agreement between the parties. In the protocol, it's part of the text. So assessments in the future under the protocol have to be carried out. That's it for me for now. Happy to answer questions later on.
Great. Thank you, Alexander. Keeping us on time as well, if I may. I think we'll reserve, unless there are burning questions at the moment, I think we'll reserve questions until the end of the session. If you could please load the next presentation. Thank you. Yep. What I want to emphasize in this part of the session today are a couple of key themes. One is around this question of trust and how we build trust in our digital economy so that the data that's necessary to be used and reused will be made available. I also want to emphasize that there's a difference between different kinds of data, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So we know from our sessions so far here that there are new technologies every day at play. Some of these are used for bad purposes, and some of them can be used for good purposes. There are new threats, and that means that there are new safeguards that are applying all the time, so that we can't rely on the old modalities to apply to current exigencies. Now, when I talk about trust, I mean the ability of all of us to participate as digital citizens in the global economy. And we posit in our World Development Report 2021 that this trust framework is an evolving social contract, and there may be different kinds of social contracts in different societies that implicate how this moves forward. Now, here I think it's important to understand that data is not a monolith. As Alexander said in his opening remarks, that the data protection aspects of the second additional protocol refer to personal data. There are other kinds of data. There's non-personal data as well, and sometimes there are mixed categories of data. Personal data, when they are anonymized, are no longer personal data because they can't be linked to a person. And this question of anonymization and attribution is very important. We heard from the Bitcoin discussion yesterday, the cryptocurrency discussion yesterday, the problems that emerge from that. I think it's important to understand where we are on this kind of three-dimensional data continuum, because if we apply rules that are intended for non-personal data to personal data, it gets confusing. And likewise, if we apply legal frameworks that are meant to apply to personal data to non-personal data, we might get some weird results. Here is just a quick example of how in our World Development Report we look at this question. For personal data, and very consistent with the approach in both the Budapest Convention and the second additional protocol, we think that personal data is based on a set of rights, individual rights, human rights, and that therefore the treatment of those personal data from a legal perspective is different than the treatment of non-personal data, which we think can be subject to kind of an economic basis of the bargain. So industrial data, intellectual property data, other kinds of non-personal data. We would not expect that those data would be treated in the same way as personal data. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why all of a sudden are we so concerned about personal data? Our own researchers at the World Bank have been working on data for decades and are a bit flummoxed by the notion that now there are concerns about protecting personal data. I won't get into the entire arc of history that has led from the creation of human rights to where we are today in protection of personal data, but there is a linear relationship that can be drawn so that we understand that these rights are not new. They've been around for a long time. They are of a greater importance today, partially because digitization has increased so much. And so that we are seeing the application of these rights that were created in an analog context and now applied to a digital context. Alexander has already spoken about how, in particular, these rights have been applied and are adhered in both the Budapest Convention and the Second Additional Protocol, so I won't go over those now. And if I may, as I wrap up, I just want to give a little promotional plug to a project that I'm happy to have two of our collaborating institutions, the Council of Europe and Interpol, working on us with. This is the second edition of our toolkit for combating cybercrime. Here are our other partners. You can see a range of international organizations, academia, and professional organizations. We're very happy to have had all of them involved. The main features of it are a toolkit, a book, a guide, if you will, that explains in greater detail. We have chapters and chapters that deal with this question of treatment of data, the balance to be achieved between security and human rights. That book is also enhanced, augmented by a set of training materials, the online training materials that can be accessed and done in person or individually from your own browser. And finally, an assessment tool, again, which can be downloaded. You can make an assessment of your readiness, generally speaking, to combat cybercrime, but also in the context of this data question, the readiness of your legal framework to address these questions, these very complex questions of treatment of personal data versus treatment of other kinds of data, including non-personal data. Again, this work is downloaded. We, the World Bank, don't see it. The Council of Europe don't see it. Interpol don't see it. It's only you. You can share that with whomever you want to. It's a very interesting tool because it does, as an ancillary benefit, it allows different individuals to do the assessment, which may result in somewhat different results, and then you can discuss them. It allows for periodic review so that if you're building capacity, you can make an assessment in 1 year, and then a year hence, you can measure the progress that you've made. So I encourage you to take a look at that in your free time. With that, I will conclude and turn it over to Sabine. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. Could we load the next PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. So I would first like to say a warm thank you to the organizers and hosts for this wonderful event and for inviting Interpol to participate on this panel. I have been asked to speak on Interpol's data protection framework, which we consider a true cornerstone for efficient international police cooperation. I will therefore gladly share with you some insights on how Interpol, as an international organization, and within its specific mandate, addresses multi-jurisdictional data protection compliance in practice. So it all starts with Interpol's constitution, adopted back in 1923, which mentions the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in one breath with Interpol's mandate. Interpol's mandate is to promote the largest international police cooperation. Essentially, that means regulating the exchange of police information at a global level, which is the reason why Interpol's work is reflected in a long-standing commitment to privacy and data protection. The importance of privacy in Interpol's operations was formally reaffirmed as early as 1974, when Interpol's General Assembly
adopted a resolution entitled Privacy of Information, which urged Interpol's national central bureaus and the General Secretariat to take into account the privacy of the individual when exchanging criminal justice information. As you are all very well aware, crime today is both physical and virtual, increasingly sophisticated and often with multi-jurisdictional components, thereby compiling challenges for law enforcement agencies. To fight crime, one has to connect the dots to see the full picture and therefore adopt a global approach. And this is precisely where Interpol comes in to facilitate such a global approach. This brings me to a first question. How can police cooperation take place in a global environment of 195 member countries with different legal cultures, including the way in which privacy and data protection are approached? Well, let me start by saying that police cooperation via Interpol's information system includes the use of a secure global communication network, a number of services, and, as of today, access to 19 global police databases. To bridge the legal gaps and allow international police cooperation to happen via Interpol's information system, Convention 108 of the Council of Europe was certainly the basis for Interpol to create its first overarching binding legal framework on data processing. And that first framework was created back in 1982-83, right after the adoption of Convention 108. The first framework included from the outset the creation of an independent supervisory board, the Commission for the Control of Interpol's Files. The Commission is an accredited member of the Global Privacy Assembly and mandated to supervise all data processing operations via the Interpol information system and addresses requests from data subjects. So the first step to bridge legal gaps was to build an overarching binding legal framework, which is regularly reviewed, assessed, and updated. And actually, since 1982, Interpol's rules have been updated on average every 3 years, and this is an ongoing cycle. And I'll get back to that in a minute. I would like to add that cooperation via Interpol is encouraged. It has the advantage of being global, making links, and translating urgent requests for police cooperation immediately in the 4 working languages. But cooperation via Interpol is not mandatory. However, once a member country chooses Interpol's channels to address a police cooperation request, the rules are binding. That being said, it is also important to note that cooperation via Interpol is à la carte. In other words, member countries can choose with whom they wish to cooperate and restrict other countries. The right to put in place country restrictions is one of the core elements to enable international police cooperation. So this leads to the question, what should an overarching legal framework look like to overcome multi-jurisdictional issues in practice? Well, the challenge is precisely to ensure that this global framework encapsulates the essence of regional and international data protection standards and safeguards. In this regard, I would like to stress 5 elements through which Interpol develops this in practice, and this is obviously an ongoing process. As a first element, the essence is perhaps that data protection touches upon fundamental rights. As seen, Interpol is rather unique in this regard in that it links its mandate directly to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in its constitution. And there are other constitutional safeguards, in particular, the independence and neutrality of the organization, through a strict prohibition on any intervention or activities of a political, military, religious, or racial character. This safeguard is implemented through multi-layered reviews at the General Secretariat of requests for police cooperation from member countries. A second element to ensure in practice that the essence of regional and international standards and safeguards is taken into account in an overarching framework is the need for clear, detailed, comprehensive rules, and not the mere listing of data protection principles. Through detailed rules, every user of the system, also those who may be less familiar with data protection principles, can more easily know, understand, and implement those rules. As a matter of illustration, Interpol's rules on the processing of data encapsulate 135 detailed provisions with an important chapter on supervision and monitoring. A third element in elaborating rules one should ensure that the language used is neutral and not regional-oriented to make the rules acceptable for all member countries. This aspect will be facilitated with the growing convergence of rules that we are currently witnessing. As an example, the notion of privacy by design, which at the origin is a Canadian concept, is not as such mentioned in Interpol's rules, but the concept is fully described in the rules and in practice embedded since years. Then a fourth element to consider is that data protection is a very dynamic area. Therefore, a regular, critical assessment of the rules is key. In this regard, Interpol's General Assembly tasked the Standing Committee for the Processing of Data, composed of member countries covering all regions, to regularly review and reassess Interpol's rules on the processing of data. This interdisciplinary committee meets at least 3 times a year, reports yearly to the General Assembly, and prepares proposals for amendments of the rules when necessary. And as a fifth element, one often hears that the devil is in the detail. Well, we prefer saying that beauty is in the implementation. And Interpol's rules actually encompass the principles of effective implementation as one of the main data protection principles. This requires supervision and monitoring measures ex ante and ex post, for instance, through awareness-raising programs or through our rather unique global network of data protection officers who are mandatorily designated in each Interpol National Central Bureau at member country level. Finally, effective data protection is a multidisciplinary effort by excellence. The development and implementation of organizational and technical measures is an ever-ongoing effort and therefore particularly challenging in a global ecosystem of 195 member countries. Thus, maintaining an overarching data protection framework is an ongoing process. For Interpol, this process started 40 years ago. Cooperation with 195 member countries, and therefore being inclusive, entails risks because of the gaps, but at the same time offers unique opportunities to bridge those gaps and foster both international police cooperation and global data protection standards and safeguards. Even though this is an ongoing challenging process, the developments made over the last 40 years are considerable. And these positive developments are also driven by the fact that international police cooperation goes hand in hand with data protection. Member countries are not inclined to share police data if they do not get assurances on the appropriate processing of the information that they share. Thus, in conclusion, I would say that our data protection framework is an invaluable asset in the fight against crime, in that it creates trust and therefore enhances police cooperation between our member countries. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you, Sabine. Over to you, Maria Solange.
Okay. ¿Listo? Hola, muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Para iniciar, creo que ya algunas ideas han sido muy reforzadas durante todas estas jornadas y quisiera solo enfatizar una idea que comprende el segundo protocolo adicional y sobre la cual evidentemente desarrolla de manera mucho más amplia lo dispuesto ya previamente por el Convenio de Budapest. Y en principio es esta idea de la interdependencia y la indivisibilidad de los derechos humanos. En ese sentido, el segundo protocolo adicional pone énfasis en el sentido precisamente de que las medidas que se adopten para fomentar la cooperación y, por otro lado, la divulgación de pruebas electrónicas no pueden, bajo ninguna circunstancia, socavar, digamos, otros derechos humanos. En particular, pone especial énfasis, como ya lo ha dicho Alexander, en el derecho a la protección de datos personales. En ese sentido, si nosotros vemos el protocolo del segundo, el preámbulo del segundo protocolo adicional, pues veremos cómo hay una mención específica al convenio 108 y específicamente también al convenio 108+, ¿no? Y en este sentido trata de armonizar precisamente la importancia que incluso desde el Consejo de Europa se le ha otorgado a este derecho en particular. Por otro lado, el capítulo tercero pues establece precisamente esas condiciones y salvaguardias a las que tampoco me referiré, dado que ya han sido expuestas. Sin embargo, sí quisiera mencionar que finalmente es muy factible que esta previsión tenga un efecto muy benéfico para impulsar también el derecho a la protección de datos personales en los estados parte del Convenio de Budapest y específicamente del segundo protocolo adicional. Si nosotros vemos este es un mapa que se ha venido generando desde el 2015 y lamentablemente no lo puse el comparativo, pero es muy impresionante ver cómo ha avanzado las legislaciones a nivel nacional en materia de protección de datos personales. Solo en el último lustro se han incorporado varios países de la región a esta ola legislativa en la materia. Es el caso, por ejemplo, de Panamá, es el caso de Brasil, es el caso de Ecuador y muy recientemente incluso el caso de Cuba. México, por supuesto, no es la excepción y en el caso de México tenemos un marco normativo muy extenso en la materia, tanto desde la perspectiva de los sistemas internacionales de derechos humanos que comprenden el derecho a la vida privada, pero también con la pertenencia, digamos, a distintos marcos normativos, tanto vinculantes como no vinculantes, dirigidos de manera muy específica a la protección de datos personales. Es el caso de las directrices de la OCDE, por ejemplo, actualizadas en 2013, del marco de privacidad APEC, es el caso también de los principios actualizados por el Comité Jurídico Interamericano de la OEA y también de los estándares iberoamericanos de protección de datos personales de la Red Iberoamericana de Protección de Datos y que son estándares que precisamente lo que pretenden es generar estándares comunes en la región. Ahí México tuvo un papel muy importante en la elaboración del borrador para la elaboración de estos estándares. Por supuesto, el Convenio 108 del Consejo de Europa. México en 2018 se adhiere a este Convenio 108 y bueno, esperemos próximamente podamos también firmar y ratificar el caso del Convenio 108 Plus. Ahora bien, ¿por qué es importante? Y esto ya me lleva un poquito a la materia. Este marco normativo también a nivel internacional resulta importante muchas veces porque no solo desarrolla propiamente el derecho a la protección de datos personales, sino como veremos más adelante, pues tiene un efecto muy positivo para impulsar la cooperación y la cooperación internacional. De hecho, no debemos perder de vista que incluso el Convenio 108 del Consejo de Europa surge, por supuesto, con la intención de impulsar, garantizar un derecho humano, como es el derecho a la privacidad, pero a su vez toma en consideración de manera muy importante los flujos transfronterizos de datos personales. De hecho, el propio Convenio 108 del Consejo de Europa, en su propia lógica de construcción, tiene precisamente la idea de generar estándares comunes que faciliten esa cooperación y ese flujo transfronterizo de datos personales para muy distintos efectos, ¿no? En el marco específico a nivel nacional, lo cierto es que México reconoce el derecho a la protección de datos personales como un derecho humano autónomo. Esto significa que está relacionado con el derecho a la vida privada, pero tiene vida propia. Y el énfasis está puesto, y esto es muy importante destacarlo, en el debido tratamiento de los datos personales. No solo beneficia, digamos, a la privacidad, y ese es su objetivo último, digámoslo así, pero en el fondo el énfasis es cómo se gestionan esos datos personales, cómo se obtienen, cómo se recaban, cómo se tratan en términos generales. Dentro de este marco normativo, no tengo tiempo de detenerme a profundidad en cada uno de estos puntos, pero sí quisiera destacar que las implicaciones de este marco normativo lo que implican es finalmente que desde nuestro derecho interno hemos logrado ajustarnos a estándares internacionales en la materia. Prácticamente, si nosotros hiciéramos un comparativo de los distintos instrumentos internacionales, veremos cómo hay una tendencia significativa a por lo menos tener de manera simétrica los principios del derecho a la protección de datos personales. Y en ese sentido, a nivel principios, creo que esta normatividad cumple con ella. Por otro lado, un aspecto fundamental tiene que ver con la constitución de autoridades independientes, autónomas de otros poderes de la Unión y de otras instancias en materia de protección de datos personales, con facultades de supervisión, con facultades regulatorias, con facultades incluso de investigación y, en el caso de México, de sanción. Y de sanción para el sector privado y de remisión del caso a las instancias competentes en el caso del sector público. Cabe decir que las autoridades de seguridad, de procuración y de administración de justicia están sujetas a este marco normativo y están sujetas también a ese control y supervisión por parte de la Autoridad de Protección de Datos Personales. En términos generales, esto resulta de vital importancia porque, y retomando lo que se dijo en algún otro panel, tiene mucho que ver incluso con campañas muy importantes a partir de la protección de datos personales para efectos de adoptar medidas de seguridad y medidas que prevengan la comisión de delitos. Hemos tenido campañas en México muy importantes, por ejemplo, en temas de suplantación de identidad, campañas que tienen que ver mucho de alguna manera con ese enfoque preventivo para evitar el crimen. Otro punto importante, y ya estoy por concluir, prevé un régimen de excepciones. Evidentemente, los temas de seguridad, procuración y administración de justicia son muchas veces pues, una excepción, digámoslo así, o implica límites y restricciones al derecho a la protección de datos personales. Sin embargo, es importante señalar que para que estas excepciones se materialicen, es necesario que estén previstas en ley y que esté sujeto a criterios de proporcionalidad. Un caso muy claro en México, de manera muy reciente, fue la intención de crear un registro nacional de usuarios de telefonía móvil con muchos datos, entre ellos datos biométricos de quienes contratan estos servicios de telefonía o de quienes adquieren una línea telefónica por razones de seguridad y procuración de justicia, pero en ese caso el registro no pasó el test de proporcionalidad y la Corte Suprema lo declaró inconstitucional. El régimen de transferencias finalmente tiene mucho que ver precisamente con esta idea de establecer salvaguardas necesarias que garanticen un nivel adecuado de protección de datos personales con la intención finalmente de garantizar ese libre flujo transfronterizo de datos personales. Ya no tengo mucho tiempo, ya concluyo, es más, ya no tengo tiempo y en ese sentido solo quisiera destacar la idea de que la protección de datos personales puede ser un importante aliado precisamente para efectos, por un lado, de ese libre flujo transfronterizo de datos personales, pero a su vez para generar confianza y a su vez para garantizar a la persona finalmente desde sus derechos humanos, que es lo que finalmente todos tenemos por objetivo. Muchas gracias a todos por su atención.
Well, I'd like to thank all the panelists for keeping on time. I would have given you another minute because some of them were early, but you can make up for it in the response to questions. So at this point, I would open the floor to questions. If you do have questions that are directed to a particular panelist, please let us know. We have one up in front here. Do we have microphones? The microphones are coming.
Sí, buenos días. Claudio Peguero, de República Dominicana. Yo tengo una duda y quizás dirija mi pregunta a María Solange o cualquier otro de los panelistas lo puede responder. Con relación a justamente la parte final de lo que usted decía sobre, desde la óptica de la justicia penal, yo siempre he visto que uno de los derechos, digamos, que más se preservan incluso al nivel constitucional, después del de la vida, pues está la protección a la intimidad, ¿verdad? El derecho a la intimidad, a la inviolabilidad del domicilio y todo lo demás. Y aún esos elementos que son, digamos, bienes jurídicos protegidos constitucionalmente, tienen excepciones, ¿verdad? Hay un momento en el que un juez, con las debidas salvaguardas, puede, en un interés mayor, ¿verdad?, sea el interés de la sociedad o de la víctima de un crimen, levantar mi derecho individual a la privacidad y ordenar mi interceptación telefónica, ordenar un allanamiento de mi residencia, ¿no? Entonces, en materia de protección de datos personales, no aplica, por ejemplo, en instrumentos como la Convención 108 o el GDPR, no está previsto, digamos, mecanismos prácticos de que cuando se trate de un tema de justicia penal, pues, digamos, sea más simple, porque yo lo veo, digamos, como un elemento que retrasa muchísimo la cooperación, complica muchísimo la cooperación cuando hay regímenes de protección de datos personales. Entonces, pienso que en instrumentos como el segundo protocolo adicional, pues sería muy útil tener ese, digamos, fast track de decir, bueno, sí, hay una salvaguarda determinada o una orden de un juez, entonces el camino para el tema de protección de datos va a ser este en lugar de aquel, ¿no?
Sí, efectivamente, bueno, desde la perspectiva de México, sí está previsto medidas específicas para temas de justicia penal, evidentemente. Sin embargo, lo cierto es que contamos incluso con medidas para permitir ese flujo transfronterizo un poco más allá del convenio 108, ¿no? Puede haber cláusulas contractuales tipo, ¿no? Puede haber normas de carácter vinculante, mecanismos de autorregulación, certificaciones, de tal manera que no tenga que haber tantos pasos previos. Aquí lo que se trata de garantizar con estos mecanismos es que la información prácticamente no acabe en paraísos digitales, ¿no? Y que haya garantías de que las autoridades van, digamos, a mantener esos principios importantes de datos personales. Existe a nivel ley como una excepción, no como un mecanismo eficaz, pero se da la posibilidad de establecer estos mecanismos de manera mucho más ágil y efectiva. Mi recomendación sería básicamente eso, ¿no? Tener un estándar previo, un acuerdo previo que permita agilizar ese flujo sin tantas formalidades específicas. Claro, ello lo que sujeta, evidentemente, pues es muchas veces la necesidad de un diálogo concreto entre distintos países. Supongo precisamente el segundo protocolo adicional lo que pretende precisamente es ello. Y creo que el hecho de establecer esas garantías mínimas podrían facilitar y agilizar de manera inmediata esto, que no tenga que ser un obstáculo constantemente.
Let me follow up quickly on that, in addition to what Maria Solange has said. Human rights, though they may be absolute in the sense of being in a constitution, they're not absolute in application. The right to freedom of expression is inherent in most constitutions, but that doesn't mean you can go into a movie theater and shout, "Fuego," fire. That's not freedom of expression that's allowed in that context. I would go back to what Alexander said in his remarks, which is that data protection, if done right, will enable these things to happen. You mentioned GDPR. Even in GDPR, while it is wonderful in setting out the principles of data protection, the rights of the individuals, the obligations of the data controllers and data processors, it also provides exceptions. And law enforcement is one of those exceptions. In countries who are following GDPR, and there are many, that exception appears in almost all of them. So that it doesn't mean that you can't, it doesn't mean that you can collect data irrespective of the other principles, but it does mean that once the data is collected properly, then it can be used for these other purposes. Other questions? Well, while you're pondering your other questions, I have a couple. this is for anyone on the panel. And I think it's a nice follow-up from the question that we've just heard. So in the area of data protection, most of these data protection laws establish a data protection authority. And some of these laws mandate that data protection offices be created in institutions. And so there's more or less a clear institutional role. In combating cybercrime, as we've heard over the course of the past couple of days, there are different actors involved. There is the prosecution service, there's the police, there are the judiciary, there are the lawmakers who make the laws, and the policymakers who decide how to embody them. And so I'd be interested to hear the observations from the panel of how to reconcile these kind of institutional imbalances, if you will, and how those who are working to combat cybercrime can work with those who are charged with protecting personal data. Any takers?
I can give the perspective from within Interpol. Working for a data protection office, which is, in essence, a compliance control function, we try to ensure, when working with our police units in-house, that there are ex-ante and ex-post data protection safeguards applied, meaning that when we develop projects or when we work with our cybercrime departments, all new projects will go through project proposal reviews, data protection impact assessments. Following that, when we do enter into cooperation with our member countries, if there are requests for information or the sharing of data through Interpol's channels, we will also proceed with compliance checks, data protection audits. We work very closely with our police services. They understand this, and after about 7 years since we initially set up our data protection office, they have recognized the win-win in working with their data protection office, where in the past we would get involved maybe a bit later on in projects, and then we would have to tackle some issues a bit later on. We see now that they even come to us at concept proposal stage, and that they work with us very early on to make sure that data protection and privacy is taken into account in their projects, because they understand that our member countries may ask about this. Our partners consider this importance as well. So in that perspective, I think it has been something that we saw in-house, that there is now greater awareness and the recognition for the importance of involving data protection and your data protection officers in projects early on.
Bueno, muy brevemente, creo que sin lugar a dudas, sumar esfuerzos siempre tendrá efectos positivos, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, lo cierto es que hay un esfuerzo importante a nivel nacional, en el caso de México, por tratar de sentar a distintas autoridades que tienen un impacto necesario o que se relacionan de manera directa con el entorno digital. Aquí retomo alguna de las mesas del día de ayer, por ejemplo, creo que se comentó, ¿no?, en la experiencia de República Dominicana, que creo que es una gran experiencia, en donde cuentan con un consejo que permite sentarse distintas autoridades directamente relacionadas. Y en el caso de México, si bien lo cierto es que no lo tenemos organizado de esa manera, hay mucho trabajo por hacer en el tema, lo cierto es que, como les decía, incluso cómo se benefician las autoridades de datos, por ejemplo, muy factiblemente de las propias capacidades de investigación que se tienen desarrolladas y de los grupos técnicos científicos dentro de la policía, ¿no? Creo que es bien importante, esa expertise puede ser compartido y beneficia también a los procesos de investigación muchas veces de las autoridades de datos. E incluso a la inversa puede darse el hecho de, por ejemplo, una cultura de la protección de datos personales pone mucho énfasis necesariamente en los peligros de un indebido tratamiento de datos personales. En el caso de México, como tenemos la autoridad nacional, pero autoridades en cada estado de la República, su capacidad de proyección y despliegue en este tipo de campañas es muy amplia. Creo que ahí puede haber un enlace, una relación muy importante entre distintas autoridades implicadas y que finalmente persiguen muchas veces pues, objetivos comunes.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Alexander.
Not just a short comment adding to this. And indeed, David, as you said, it can be quite a complicated task because you have multiple services, multiple agencies involved. And of course, at the end of the criminal justice chains are courts. And it would be a bit weird if then data protection authorities start to correct courts and that courts are accountable to data protection authorities. So could all create all sorts of constitutional problems then. So that's why in the protocol, yes, parties to this protocol under Article 14, paragraph 15, have to set up oversight bodies for data protection, but to do this cumulatively, it can be more, one or more, that cumulatively and independently exercise these functions. So that takes account of the flexibility we needed, where there are very different systems in place in different countries, in different countries or different regions of the world. And that flexibility is also built in. So the function is there, but how exactly this is to be put in place is left to the parties.
Thank you. We have time for one more question from the floor, if there is one. Yes? Microphone, please. It's coming.
Gracias, buenos días. Me gustaría saber el criterio de los panelistas con relación al acceso transfronterizo a datos sobre antecedentes penales. Este tema de la no discriminación por antecedentes penales está en muchas constituciones de nuestros países. Sin embargo, en muchas ocasiones se tiene que permitir el acceso no solamente para temas de investigación, sino, por ejemplo, para la eliminación de requisitos de visado. Entonces, me interesa mucho saber desde esta perspectiva de protección de datos cómo se maneja en sus países el tema de los antecedentes penales. Gracias.
Es un tema muy, muy complicado, sin lugar a dudas. Yo me atrevería a decir, ciertamente no hay criterios homogéneos en los distintos sistemas jurídicos. En el caso de México, lo cierto es que los antecedentes penales sí están disponibles para la autoridad, pero no de manera pública, ¿no? Sí es información totalmente confidencial y necesaria. Y yo diría, entra evidentemente para efectos de cooperación internacional, entra dentro de la categoría factiblemente de datos personales sensibles. Y en ese sentido tendría que estar ajustado, sin embargo, nuevamente, por tratarse de objetivos legítimos, perseguidos para efectos de poderlos compartir, ¿no? O transferir, creo que es factible siempre y cuando se cumplan efectivamente esos estándares.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the Council of Europe for having us all here. Thank you, panelists. Thanks for questions from the floor. In an effort to put us slightly back on schedule after the bus delays this morning, I think I'll close the session now. We've saved a minute and 30 seconds. Yay. Thank you all.
I think according to the plan, we have a coffee break, but again, to bring us also and keep us a bit back on track, let's resume at 11:15. Okay, don't make use of half an hour, but 25 minutes. And when you hear the music, when Interpol plays the music, you have to come in, you know that.
You know you can go it.
Okay, please be seated. We are starting with the conclusions and final remarks of this forum. We'll give about 20 seconds for the people that are lost in action out there to come in. Okay, we'll have now a roundtable with conclusions, final remarks, in particular takeaways of the different workshops. And we will start with José Joaquín Hernández Rojas, President of the Special Commission for Science, Technology and Education of the Legislative Assembly of Costa Rica, to report on the results of Workshop 2.
Muy buenos días, saludo cordial a todos los compañeros y compañeras de la mesa principal y a todos ustedes. Primero que todo, muy contento como costarricense de que este evento se haya llevado a cabo en este país. Sean hoy y siempre bienvenidos a Costa Rica. Como presidente de la Comisión Especial de Ciencia y Tecnología de la Asamblea Legislativa, he recibido el honor de la invitación y participar en este evento tan importante. Me toca comentar el papel de los responsables de política pública en la justicia penal y los legisladores en la lucha contra la ciberdelincuencia, que fue un taller llevado a cabo el día lunes. En dicho taller también resalto el hecho de que participó miembros de la FOPREL, que es el Foro de Presidentes y Presidentas de los Poderes Legislativos de Centroamérica, la Cuenca del Caribe y México. Dicho sea de paso también, el día de ayer continuamos en este análisis de este tema tan importante allá en la Asamblea Legislativa. Quiero decir que dentro de los temas que hablamos y discutimos, dejamos claro que hoy el uso y la dependencia de las tecnologías es enorme. La pandemia vino también a evidenciar muchas carencias que tenemos países en cuanto a brechas digitales, en especial en áreas urbanas versus las áreas rurales y costeras. El proteger las infraestructuras críticas de las instituciones es un reto enorme. Sabemos que en esto del cibercrimen, del ciberdelito, se mueve mucho dinero porque el valor del activo de los datos y la información es algo que perciben los mercados negros. Dejamos claro en ese taller lo importante que es la cooperación internacional, dado que esa asistencia mutua es fundamental para poder combatir la ciberdelincuencia. También en ese taller, dentro del resumen que les puedo dar, quedó claro que todos los días aumentan los ataques. Se necesita en los países tener centros nacionales de ciberseguridad, protocolos de protección, invertir la mayor cantidad de recursos que se pueda. Necesitamos también tener en los países legisladores, como en el caso personal, consciente de que es muy necesario adaptar las leyes que hoy consideramos leyes analógicas a una era digital. También que el ordenamiento jurídico en los países contemple la ciberseguridad como un elemento fundamental. Otro aspecto de este taller fue el dejar claro que se necesitan campañas de educación desde los niños para esa cultura preventiva en todo el uso de las tecnologías, desde su mismo celular y cualquier otro dispositivo. Está claro que hoy está a la orden del día las estafas, los fraudes, las suplantaciones de identidades, las extorsiones por estos ciberdelincuentes. Ser preventivos es fundamental. Hay que trabajar en conjunto tanto lo público como lo privado. Y en un comentario que hicieron varios de los participantes, como ejemplo se puso los datos del sistema de salud de cada país, que a veces tiene un valor más alto para estos ciberdelincuentes que la misma información financiera. Otro aspecto importante es el tener un registro nacional e internacional de ciberdelincuentes. Hay criminales informáticos ya con organizaciones financiadas y en los cuales pues es una amenaza de todo el mundo. Las tecnologías de información y comunicación, así como han traído grandes beneficios y oportunidades, está claro que traen riesgos que debemos atender. Otro aspecto que quedó claro en el taller es el gran reto que tenemos los países de formar más y más profesionales en ciberseguridad, porque ahora cualquier empresa necesita tener equipo humano que proteja la información. A manera de resumen, puedo decirles que de este taller quedó claro la necesidad de legislación sobre ciberseguridad, inclusive aspirar a tener en los países una procuraduría especializada en este tema. La importancia de tipificar los delitos informáticos, adaptarnos a la cooperación internacional, todos, porque sabemos que los servidores y donde están los sitios de almacenamiento puede ser en cualquier parte del mundo. El derecho que debemos aspirar a tener todos los países que suscribamos este convenio para poder solicitar la información necesaria a otros países. La inversión de recursos, como lo dije, es fundamental, y las políticas de educación preventivas contra la ciberdelincuencia. Quiero terminar mi resumen diciendo que el AFOPREL, el Foro de Presidentes y Presidentas de los Poderes Legislativos de Centroamérica y del Caribe, aprovechando este Foro de las Américas sobre el tema, ayer suscribimos entre todos los parlamentos del AFOPREL una resolución sobre acciones legislativas de cooperación en materia de ciberdelincuencia y pruebas electrónicas, y suscribimos el compromiso de firmar y adaptarnos al Convenio de Budapest en aquellos países que no lo han hecho hasta el momento. Y en el punto 1 y 2 de este documento que se analizó ayer, dice lo siguiente: reiterar nuestro compromiso de fortalecer con carácter de prioridad los marcos legislativos penales con el fin de proteger a la sociedad frente a la ciberdelincuencia. Asimismo, promover la adopción de legislación apropiada en dicha materia y el fomento de la cooperación internacional. Y en el punto 2, promover desde nuestros parlamentos la adhesión al Convenio de Budapest sobre la ciberdelincuencia y sus protocolos adicionales referidos a la criminalización de actos cometidos a través de sistemas informáticos. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. This is excellent. We have been struggling for years to find a way to cooperate with parliaments, with legislators, legislative assemblies, and with your help and with the help of FOPREL, we are on a very good track. And also, this declaration that was adopted is a very good outcome of this week here in Costa Rica. Wonderful. Great. Many thanks. We continue now with workshop 1. And we have a summary of the results by Marco Salt from Argentina, one of our ambassadors here in the Americas of the Budapest Convention. Marcos, please.
Escucharon lo que dijo, ¿no? Porque voy a pedir el pasaporte diplomático. Después lo va a tener que conseguir. Porque si soy embajador, quiero un pasaporte. Bueno, el Workshop 1, como ustedes saben, estuvo dedicado al segundo protocolo adicional de la Convención de Budapest. Voy a tratar de hacer un sumario de las cuestiones más importantes que fueron señaladas durante el workshop y algunos debates que surgieron. En primer lugar, se remarcó el problema que implica para todo el sistema penal la necesidad de acceso transfronterizo de datos. Esto quedó muy claro, no solo por los expositores, sino también por las participaciones de todos, de que tenemos un problema con la necesidad del sistema penal en general, ya no solamente la investigación de ciberdelitos, porque la prueba está diseminada hoy en servidores en todo el mundo, y entonces es una necesidad absoluta poder contar con algún mecanismo internacional eficiente para lograr el acceso transfronterizo. También quedó claro cómo este problema va en aumento. Por un lado, mayor cantidad de ciberdelitos, por otro lado, el hecho de que se empiece a reemplazar la prueba física con prueba digital hace que esto sea un tema de todas las investigaciones penales. Hubo un ejemplo de la colega de República Dominicana que contó un ejemplo de un caso donde le costó explicar por qué en un caso común no tenía testigos, digamos, y cómo esto empieza a ser algo generalizado para todo el sistema penal. Y por otro lado, por el aumento de información en la nube y la necesaria vinculación con el sector privado. Un tema interesante fue la explicación sobre el proceso de redacción del segundo protocolo adicional. ¿Y por qué creo que es muy importante? Primero porque el proceso de redacción es lo que le da también mucha fuerza al convenio. Por eso tantos países lo han firmado ya y por eso yo realmente creo que es un convenio en el que debemos intentar que todos los países lo firmen lo antes posible. No fue un convenio redactado entre gallos y medianoche, tuvo un proceso democrático, participativo, y en donde los países de la región que son miembros de la Convención tuvieron un rol fundamental y fueron escuchados. Y esto es muy importante porque compatibiliza también muchas de las necesidades de los países de la región. Se analizaron cuáles son las ventajas, se explicaron las normas que tienen que ver con la cooperación asimétrica, la cooperación con empresas del sector privado, y creo que quedó bastante claro que si bien hay situaciones que en nuestros países están solucionadas con la cooperación voluntaria de algunos proveedores, cuestión que generó algún debate con la representante de la empresa Google, pero en general hubo un acuerdo de que había un trabajo que ya se estaba haciendo de manera informal, creemos que quedó muy claro la ventaja de ir hacia sistemas formalizados, con un marco normativo que permita que no haya debate sobre la validez de esas evidencias, pero al mismo tiempo con la ventaja de que se puedan obtener de una manera estandarizada, que todos conozcamos y que no dependa de los protocolos de cada una de las compañías y de lo que es la cooperación meramente voluntaria, sino que haya mecanismos que permitan a nuestras autoridades poder obtener estos datos con mayor eficiencia y fuerza también, y en un marco de garantías y de protección de datos. Se analizaron también los procedimientos de emergencia y la importancia que tienen. Vimos algunos ejemplos prácticos de en qué situaciones podía ser muy útil frente a procesos de emergencia, las dos normas que prevé el protocolo adicional, y se analizó también las ventajas para lo que es el mejoramiento de la cooperación formal con la incorporación de medidas que, si bien están en otros tratados internacionales, aplicadas específicamente a los ciberdelitos y a lo que tiene que ver con la obtención de prueba digital, puede lograr importantes resultados como es la videovigilancia y los equipos conjuntos de investigación, tema que creo que fue uno de los más debatidos durante el workshop. La posibilidad real de que los países de la región puedan tener equipos conjuntos de investigación. Mi opinión personal es que sí. Hubo algunas de las personas presentes que opinaban que era más difícil de organizar. Creemos que el protocolo va a ser un instrumento internacional importante para que sea más fácil y que realmente esto que alguien de la Fuerza de Seguridad especialmente señalaba como algo escéptico en la región, pueda ser realmente una realidad, que podamos tener equipos conjuntos de investigación en materias como el cibercrimen. Y por último, el camino a seguir. Se discutió cuál era el camino a seguir. Me parece que esto es sencillo de concluir. adherir a la Convención de Budapest, al protocolo adicional, y como señalaba Alexander, estudiar muy bien las normas del protocolo. Es un convenio absolutamente revolucionario, un cambio total de lo que son las ideas de cooperación internacional en materia penal, y creo que puede ser el inicio de nuevas formas de cooperación que se extiendan a otro tipo de problemáticas también. Entonces, adherir, estudiarlo y trabajar fuertemente en los países para la implementación, creo que es una buena conclusión del workshop.
Thank you, Marcos. I was in that workshop, and this is a very good summary of the results. I'm a witness to that. Also to underline, yes, not only, Marcos is not saying it only because he's a professor, but that you have to study. But it's also my opinion that you have to look into the details, play it through. If you need us to come and do sessions with you, workshops with you, to play it through and see how this plays out in your country, where you may need to do amendments to your domestic laws, we are available to assist you with that. We now continue with representative of the Organization of American States, Rodrigo Silva. As we said earlier in this conference, the OAS has been a crucial partner of us for many years and has encouraged countries to join the Budapest Convention already more than 15 years ago. Rodrigo.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. Just going to make a brief summary of the Workshop 3, which was the interplay between cybersecurity and cybercrime. It should be noted that the session began with mention of the transformation of our lives, and in our lifetimes, really, to one involved in cyberspace. You know, how, it's during our lifetimes, if we're, well, personally, it's a person my age, right? My life's completely changed to the past 2 decades at least, and how our lives are more and more in cyberspace. And in that respect, we see crimes as well, being transformed from one being committed physically to one's now, as we see now, hoy en día, as I say, transformed to cyberspace. To that end, presentations were made by the OAS, between ourselves and REMJA, and from SICTE, as well as from the GFCE, highlighting the programs involved in helping countries address cybercrime and cybersecurity in the region. It was also noted how these programs are, in terms of carrying out within the same organizations, do divide the issue of cybersecurity and cybercrime, whether in their working groups or the entities found in each organization. With respect to the presentation made by the panel representatives from Chile, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Mexico, the importance of collaboration and coordination was highlighted, from a cyber incident to investigation and prosecution involving actors such as the incident response teams, law enforcement, prosecution, and the judiciary. We heard examples and instances where this is key, and a manner to carry out this collaboration, noting the experience from the Dominican Republic, as well as Chile in this respect. This is especially important given that each of these actors have different roles for different purposes, and as a result, have different needs and perspectives in responding to a cyber incident. For example, the requirements of a prosecutor will be different from an incident response team or law enforcement. It also, in that respect, also comment was made about how during the presentations, whether it was a prosecutor or whatnot, even though we're using the same terms or same terminology when it comes to the cybercrime or cyber incident, they might have different concepts or different meanings depending on the role of the person. And for this reason why it is really important to have this collaboration, coordination, in order to be on the same page and understand where we're coming from in responding to a cyber incident. It was also noticed the importance of having updated legislation to respond to a cyber incident, especially as it relates to extradition and mutual legal assistance requests, as this makes it difficult for prosecutors to make requests for international cooperation. The offenses set out in the Budapest are key, but we will also have, the discussion is made, we also have to consider new and emerging modalities that may also require such legislation. Such an example, of course, as we see, is ransomware. However, it was also noted that other ones may be of more importance or might have more of an impact today, with the example of cryptocurrencies being noted, With these new and emerging modalities of cybercrime, new or updated or amended legislation may be required. Also, finally, there was also a theme throughout the whole discussions in terms of public outreach and awareness building among the public and private sector, and also as well as state actors, to report any cyber incident. And what are the steps or what are the programs in place in order to encourage them to make such a report in order to address when a cyber incident occurs. There was also interest as well as how to respond to particular groups, taking into account gender or other aspects, and how to encourage those kind of reports to be made cyber incidents, which might require a different tact or perspective in that respect. This is in general is what I think was discussed during the panel, and I thank you very much for your time.
Indeed, this gives us also inspirations of how we can, in our future programs, enhance links between what we do in order to support capacity building on cybercrime and the connections to the cybersecurity area, because there's a lot of demand for that, and lots of issues come in, including, of course, how do you then transfer data, and the data protection issues that we discussed in the previous sessions and so on. What protocols can be established in order to permit such cooperation to be effective, efficient. So thanks a lot. Lots of good ideas came out from that workshop. We now continue with the workshop 4, which was about 24/7 points of contact. My great pleasure is to give the floor to Betty Schaaf, one of the drafters of the Budapest Convention, heavily involved in the negotiation of the second additional protocol. 100 years of experience in the Department of Justice, in CSIPs, investigating cybercrime, and also former chair of the Cybercrime Convention Committee, and a good friend. Betty.
I'm going to strike a blow against cybercrime by using paper. So there were 4 takeaways from our session, but preliminarily there were a couple of foundational agreements, and they were that the ability to send preservation requests directly to providers based outside your country, and the existence of the 24/7 system, sending requests via the 24/7 system, that they were important. Also very important was the ability to obtain data from providers subject to US law, pursuant to the voluntary system that exists in the United States. And the use of the 24/7 system for any type of crime, including physical crime, is important. So those were the things that were agreed on preliminarily. The takeaways were the following. Some countries have 1 point of contact for the 24/7 system. Some countries have 2. Which system is better? That's a long-standing, unresolved debate. It may be that your legal system will dictate whether 1 or 2 points of contact is better for your country. But regardless of whether it is 1 or 2 points of contact have to be competent to handle all the responsibilities that they're accorded under the Budapest Convention, and then now newly accorded under the second additional protocol. And they have to be cyber specialized or at least cyber competent. Coordination based on a clear internal protocol is necessary so that coordination between the 2 points of contact is seamless, or so that coordination between the single point of contact and anyone else who's necessary to handle a request is also seamless. Now, the second point, it was perfectly clear that the greatest use of the 24/7 system is for sending preservation requests outside your own country. And sometimes sending a request through the 24/7 point of contact can facilitate the handling of the request. And sometimes providers will insist that a foreign request come through the point of contact. And that's all fine, as long as preservation requests don't clog the 24/7 channel, as long as they don't cause a traffic jam. Request volumes are increasing, everyone agreed, including for physical world crimes. And there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that it is very important for countries to educate anyone in the criminal justice system who needs to know this. First of all, that the 24/7 system exists, that it's available, and secondly, that that individuals in countries can send requests, preservation requests, direct to providers outside the country. By individuals, I mean within the government. The third point was, what additional support do points of contact need? And here there was quite a strong consensus. They need training, various types of training. They need a clear legal basis, perhaps regulations, for the capabilities that are required of points of contact. And so for some countries that may mean that it is not sufficient to become a party to the Budapest Convention. What may be needed in addition is implementing domestic legislation. Institutional cooperation and proper case management systems are necessary so that requests don't get lost, the preservation doesn't expire, and so on. And then points of contact need money. They need money for people, for training, for equipment, even for things like updating software licenses. So you might say, everyone needs money. Why do points of contact deserve this money? And there were several reasons. The first was they're processing more and more cases. They are never going to come to a point where they're processing fewer cases or fewer requests for preservation. And now they are having to deal with new types of providers, not just traditional internet service providers, which was already sufficiently challenging, but now virtual asset providers. And then, by definition, when countries use the 24/7 system, they are relying on each other. So if one country lacks the resources to offer the help that it would like to offer, then other countries feel that lack of resources. It potentially undermines the network, never mind what it is doing for the under-resourced country. And the last point was, what do Articles 9 and 10 of the Second Additional Protocol on emergencies offer? And here there was agreement that they are unique in international law in the sense that they provide a legal basis for emergency assistance. And the expectation is that they will speed responses and make the network more operational when physical safety is threatened, as defined in the Second Additional Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you. And indeed, the Second Additional Protocol gives additional tasks to the 24/7 network. Very important to keep that in mind, also when you staff and resource your 24/7 contact points. Plus this point that came up in the workshop about dealing with new types of providers, including virtual asset service providers, that opens up a whole new world, because that also means then domestically to reach out to financial intelligence units and others that are involved in all of this. Major tasks ahead, but we have all the solutions in here, sort of. One thing that, since you have these notes here, please send us your summary notes, your concluding notes, so that we can compile them. And you have a wonderful handwriting, Betty, we also take a scan of your notes. Workshop 5 had two themes, in a way. One, a general one on cybercrime threats and trends, and then one about the deep throat, follow the money. So that means we also have two presenters here of the conclusions regarding workshop 5. We start with Michael Stavas, and then we have Jacqueline DeLange afterwards. Mike.
Thank you. I was able to see the panel on parallel investigations, cybercrime investigation and financial investigation. And I was very impressed by the moderation, by the way. It was noted many cybercrimes are in fact motivated by profit. And so both specialties, cybercrime investigation and financial tracing and recovery, are both required. And I think there was consensus that specialization is required for both and in short supply. And so the experts must learn to work together to benefit from both areas of specialty. Costa Rica shared its experience in setting up a specialized unit more recently, and how they started by cataloging cybercrime that they were seeing in their country. This is something that I don't think the United States has done, and in fact, we are only now coming to definitions of cybercrime within our own law. And so I thought it was a very interesting way to start, and I'm very much looking forward to reviewing the guide that Costa Rica put together on investigating cyber scams, which they determined to be the largest cybercrime in Costa Rica. After that, we learned about the different capabilities of financial intelligence units around the world and how these tools are exceptionally important because of the very small window in order to capture money from the time it is taken from victims, whether it is stolen or extorted from them, and it starts to disperse through the various layers of complex money laundering organizations, including mule accounts. FIUs have formal and sometimes informal means of stopping transactions and freezing assets, although those capabilities do vary by country and in many cases could use more development. We look forward to a new tool Interpol will release this December, the ARRP protocol, that will help identify authorities for freezing assets or at least triggering money laundering risk assessments, reducing the time to action. On the note of things becoming more complex, of course, the panel had to address cryptocurrencies and the opportunities for criminals with such technologies as mixers and tumblers that mix funds in a way that make tracing even more difficult. And yet, in the face of the many obstacles, the panel identified a number of opportunities. While it may be difficult to regulate every entity in this new space, there are few enough large players where law enforcement can focus. And even though the panelists have seen crimes using lesser-known tokens, there are only a few cryptocurrencies currently that have a large enough scale to support large-scale money laundering. So at least for now, the crypto space has numerous connections with traditional regulated financial systems that law enforcement can take advantage of. But of course, even these systems are globally connected, and so again, cooperation among countries is critical. We were given optimism that collaboration can in fact lead to successes, hearing about significant operations that benefited from cooperation between Costa Rica and the United States, as well as Cyprus. And it was noted that such successes are necessary to what was deemed the 0.1% problem, that there are too few criminals currently being caught to provide the deterrence that we all seek for future crime. Sergio made excellent points about taking advantage of new technologies to address the scale of the problem and advance the protection of our citizens. I know this will be of particular interest to the Council of Europe as it embarks on a new treaty on artificial intelligence, and it was noted that artificial intelligence will be needed to address the scope of modern cybercrime, and that AI can be used to benefit the reduction of cybercrime. There was also discussion of proactive, more intelligence-driven approaches, such as proactively monitoring Telegram channels where financial data is bought and sold. And to give due credit to the participants that weren't on the panel, we had very interesting interventions from the floor, including discussion of whether it is sufficiently clear that when law enforcement obtains the technical means to move value on a blockchain, for instance, they obtain the key to a wallet, is it legally clear that they are allowed to move that value when the blockchain itself doesn't exist in only one country? And so it was agreed that there are many interesting questions left, and we should gather again soon.
But indeed, what is the location of a crypto in the blockchain? Okay, I think that's for some professors to think about also. Okay, we continue with the second part of Workshop 5. Jacqueline, please.
Thank you very much. I will just summarize and give you some key takeaways from panel 5 that discussed threats and trends. Now, it was not debatable that one of the biggest challenges we have in cybercrime is ransomware attacks, and that it is a priority crime for all of us to address. The panel discussed specifically that technology gives threat actors an opportunity to commit cybercrime, and they use ransomware and cryptocurrency as an opportunity to raise their traces as well as evidence. Countries without MLAs obviously makes it very more complicated to investigate cybercrime. And we agreed that there is a need for robust legislation and policies to investigate cybercrime and on how to approach the investigation properly, correctly, and in a standardized way. During the panel, it was also discussed that it is advisable that private companies don't pay ransom to threat actors of ransomware attacks, as it is not given that the data will be decrypted at the end of the day. Private companies generally are able and willing to pay ransom due to the fear of fines and reputational damage, and normally only report cases to law enforcement agencies for insurance purposes. And generally, there is no regulation put in place that prevents countries from paying these ransom demands. It was also discussed that when companies do pay ransom, it's normally done in crypto payments, and this leads to even more complicated investigations, as most prosecutors and investigators still need training and the necessary skills on cryptocurrency investigations and blockchain analysis tools. And we are also sitting with some challenges with regards to expired licenses. The panel discussed as well that international cooperation is a challenge due to cybercrime threat actors being in more countries than one, as well as victims. And there's a need to make use of the 24/7 point of contact to talk to each other and to facilitate and coordinate investigations properly and swiftly. There's a need for urgent MLAs was discussed, referring to Article 27 of the Budapest Conventions with regards to procedures pertaining to mutual assistance requests
in the absence of applicable international agreements for points of contacts at central authorities to communicate directly with each other as there is a need for quick action in this regard. As mentioned, we need a coordinated response from all countries when investigating cybercrime, and a good practice implemented and discussed yesterday during the panel from the US is that they centralize all agencies' information into one database. The government will then assign one specific office to coordinate a specific investigation with regards to a specific malware variant. And this ensures that the variant specifications are monitored and gathered properly for easier attribution. It was also agreed during the panel that there is a general lack of knowledge and skills to investigate cybercrimes, and more needs to be done to upskill prosecutors and investigators to properly investigate these cases, especially with regards to cryptocurrency investigations. What to do with victims that do not want to cooperate and only report cases to law enforcement agencies for insurance purposes and thereafter do not give any cooperation with regards to information on the specific attack. It was discussed that information is of utmost importance and necessary to build a case and collect data that could link and identify possible threat actors and organized crime groups behind these attacks. It's also important for purposes of correct database statistics on cybercrime, as well as identifying cybercrime trends and threats. Due to us, it's necessary for us to inform the public and for possible prevention purposes. That is why it's very important that these cases are reported continuously. It is a fact that it's mandatory to report normal crime, and this is not necessarily the case with cybercrime, depending on the legislation of different countries. Attacks happen in many countries, and it's helpful and necessary to have a global database to get a global picture of ransomware attacks, threats and trends, and malware samples. This is very important for prevention, detection, investigation, and disruption of cybercrime. With regards to cybercrime legislation, most countries do not prohibit the payment of ransom, but they do advise victims of attacks not to pay for ransom demands. Yet in some countries, the payment of ransom money could also be a criminal offense, as it could be seen as a crime of extortion. Other than ransomware, that is a priority cybercrime, the floor and also the panel indicated that there is a rising in online child exploitation material, as well as violence against women and children, and banking scams that needs to also be seen as priority cybercrime. In conclusion, it is very relevant that the focus should be on common standards that are already in place and functioning, such as the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, and as seen again during this forum, on approaches such as capacity building that is very important. And as Alexander said, study the manual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and also to underline that there are different provisions in the Convention on Cybercrime that address ransomware attacks, that you can also use the cooperation tools of the Convention, and in particular also of the new second protocol to deal and cooperate on ransomware attacks. By the end of this month, we hope that the Cybercrime Convention Committee will adopt the guidance note that makes this book even thicker. That will then also be attached in the next edition on how to deal with ransomware attacks under the framework of the Convention. So thank you. My pleasure now to give the floor to Alexandra Asghari, who is now working for the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, but who made quite a career in our office in Bucharest over several years. Alexandra, please.
Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to bring to you the conclusions of Workshop 6 on capacity building in judicial training. This workshop looked at the latest development at regional level in terms of capacity building for judges and prosecutors. And one of the very first points agreed on is that beyond laws, tools, and cooperation, in a lot of countries, one of the greatest challenges still is the lack of sufficient capacities of criminal justice authorities. So all panelists and participants agreed that sustained judicial and prosecutorial training is essential when talking about cybercrime and electronic evidence. There are already some global and regional initiatives in the area. We heard, for example, from LAC4, REMHA, and Council of Europe initiatives. These deal with similar challenges and each develop specific solutions, such as developing online tools or organizing training workshops with hybrid participation, or even setting up networks such as the International Network of National Judicial Trainers. These initiatives have common aspirations. A lot of points were found across these different initiatives, such as an accent on strengthening national capacities with a focus on academia and on integrating specific training international curricula for judges and prosecutors. Another aspect was developing a network of experts which would allow the sharing of experience, peer-to-peer sharing of experience, and encouraging partnerships and connections, which are particularly important for international cooperation. Sustainability was mentioned a lot. This is essential. Judicial training cannot be done as singular events, and these initiatives as well need to remain sustainable on the longer run. And lastly, cooperation is considered equally important, not only to avoid duplication, but also to ensure an effective use of resources, and even forward moving towards synergies, building on these initiatives and already achieve results in the area.
Thank you. So this concludes the reporting back from the different workshops. And if you listen to all the summaries that were presented here, all of them are actionable. And for none of them, you have to wait. You can start implementing them right away. We will, in a report on this conference, on this forum, also include all of these summaries and for you to have some concrete takeaways from this event. We now come to a number of concluding remarks, and it's my pleasure to give the floor again to Mr. José Joaquín Hernández from the Legislative Assembly for his remarks.
Bueno, reiterarles lo contento que estoy de que un evento de esta naturaleza se lleve a cabo, y más si es en nuestro país, Costa Rica. Hoy más que nunca queda claro que para combatir la ciberdelincuencia y todos estos males que se han dado por el avance impresionante de la tecnología, requiere de que todos los países pongamos de nuestra parte toda la ayuda necesaria, porque por ser un tema tecnológico, la evidencia de un delito a veces se encuentra a miles de kilómetros y se requiere de esa colaboración. Qué bueno que existen organizaciones como las que hoy están aquí representadas para decirle al mundo de que vamos a proteger a los ciudadanos, vamos a proteger los datos, porque es muy importante si queremos seguir viviendo en un mundo donde la tecnología juega un papel importante. De nuestra parte, en Costa Rica, estamos haciendo un gran esfuerzo para irnos adaptando en todo lo que sea necesario para combatir el cibercrimen y la ciberdelincuencia, estableciendo la ciberseguridad como una prioridad. Y en ese sentido, quiero decirles que en nombre del presidente de la Asamblea Legislativa, don Rodrigo Arias Sánchez, que estuvo en la inauguración el día lunes, les transmito el agradecimiento de él, del AFOPREL, que es el Foro de Presidentes y Presidentas de los Congresos de Centroamérica, la Cuenca del Caribe y México, y en lo personal, como miembro de una comisión de Ciencia y Tecnología de la Asamblea, me uno a ello para agradecer a cada una y a cada uno de ustedes la presencia en esta gran actividad y decirles que Costa Rica estará ayudando en todo lo que se necesita. Muchas gracias, don Alexander.
Excellent. And now the floor is for Juan Carlos Cubillo Miranda, who is from the Public Prosecutor's Office, and he's also the representative of Costa Rica in the Cybercrime Convention Committee, also actively involved in the negotiation of the second protocol. Please.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todo, a don Alexander, los compañeros y compañeras de la mesa principal, y sobre todo muchas gracias a todas ustedes y todos ustedes que vinieron a Costa Rica. Bueno, ya hoy mandamos a despejar las nubes y ya esperamos que mañana mejore el clima, mañana y pasado, y les agradecemos que hayan venido a nuestro país a discutir un tema que para nosotros en los meses anteriores fue muy angustiante, porque cuando estamos en esa situación realmente no sabíamos qué hacer. A Dios gracias, éramos parte, bueno, somos parte del convenio de Budapest, tenemos contactos y pudimos salir avante. Ya conectamos otra vez los sistemas, ya podemos hacer las declaraciones del IVA, ya podemos ir a la caja del Seguro Social, y también hemos tenido que poner sistemas de ciberseguridad porque también estábamos un poquito retrasados y no habíamos visto, o las instituciones no habían visto en algún momento y la necesidad que se requería invertir en ciberseguridad. En este foro hemos compartido experiencias y buenas prácticas de todas y todos ustedes, de la forma en que nosotros abordamos las investigaciones, cada uno de ustedes, y me parece que el segundo protocolo de la Convención de Budapest es una herramienta de las más, o diría la más avanzada, que incluye a los países donde están los principales proveedores de servicios, y eso es muy importante toda vez que a partir de, o sea, ahí es donde nosotros vamos a solicitar la información. Y también es muy importante resaltar, como vimos en la mañana, que el segundo protocolo tiene un eje transversal y no tenemos que tener ningún miedo porque hay una protección de los derechos humanos en todo el protocolo de la privacidad, y por lo tanto es una herramienta trascendental para el combate contra la ciberdelincuencia. Me agrada también que se encuentren las compañeras de Cancillería, doña Lina también, la compañera de Tratados, porque también, bueno, tenemos que estar en el proceso también ya de la certificación, de las justificaciones, y a mi derecha también tenemos a los compañeros de la Asamblea Legislativa, porque después de pasar un proceso vamos a ir allá, porque nosotros los operadores, los fiscales, ocupamos esta herramienta para trabajar. Si bien estamos trabajando con el artículo 18 del Convenio de Budapest, que nos permite solicitar información, y así lo estamos haciendo a los proveedores de servicio que dan servicio en nuestro país, con el segundo protocolo que desarrolla ese artículo 18, entonces ya vamos a poder solicitarlo de una manera directa a los operadores de servicio, no solamente por una solicitud amigable, que lo hacemos ahora, podemos emitir una orden, y también en casos de emergencia lo vamos a poder hacer de una manera más fácil, y también de una manera en que nosotros lo podemos incorporar, esa prueba o esa evidencia, muy fácil en nuestras investigaciones, en los debates, y así poder tener resultados exitosos. Y para finalizar, porque los compañeros de la Fiscalía de Cibercrimen, de la Policía de Ciberdelito de Costa Rica, bueno, quieren entregarle una pequeñita muestra de cariño al staff que organizó todo esto, el Consejo de Europa, y nada más para informarles al resto, hubiéramos deseado para todos, pero bueno, no podemos, que es precisamente de donde viene esa rueda que está ahí. Esa es una rueda de una carreta. No nos pusimos de acuerdo, pero esa es una rueda de una carreta que representa las carretas en donde nuestros productores de café llevaban el café para tostarlo. Entonces tenemos unas carretitas para don Alexander, doña Cristina, don Pedro, Catalina, Elena, Irina, Ana, Florian, Marta. No sé si, porque tengo otra vez otra Elena. Hay dos Elenas, creo. Hay dos Elenas, ok. Y en la carretita viene una muestra también de café que es recogido, ya está molido, así que huele muy bien, que es recogido por las mujeres, solamente de las mujeres de la zona, que es una zona en Sarchí, en Naranjo. Entonces es muy especial para nosotros. Y también nos pareció que era importante y especial para el foro que empieza también mañana. Entonces los compañeros que están allá, que me pidieron que rompiera todo el protocolo y que entonces a donde los encuentren, y los que no, bueno, el de don Pedro los pueden dejar ahí, y de parte pues de la Fiscalía General de la República, agradecerles por haber escogido Costa Rica. Entonces los compañeros van a... Y si huele a café es porque ese café agarrado a las mujeres es...
Vaya usted y le entrega. Qué bonito detalle. Muy bien, muy bien.
Hombre, si tuvimos que ir al y es que no, es que...
Lo que ocupes ahí para ver
cómo
te ayudamos allá.
Sí, claro.
Tramitar cualquier cosa que haya que cambiar o hacer.
No, es que esta gente vieras cómo nos ayudan.
Absolutely wonderful. We really moved, and now we have the secrets of where this symbol, symbol here on the screen comes from. Really great. Thank you. Indeed, it is wonderful to be here in Costa Rica, and I say is because we are still here, and most of us will still be here until the end of the week for another forum, for another conference. There are a number of clear messages that come out from this forum, and as we experienced before, it can be summarized in a few words, and in one word it says, let's cooperate. There is no alternative to that. We have no choice. We have to cooperate with each other at all levels if we want to deal with this complex issue of cybercrime and electronic evidence, challenges to human rights, democracy and the rule of law, challenges to international peace, challenges to economies, challenges to everything. We have to cooperate, and there is no excuse for not doing it because the tools are there. And the practical proposals that come also out from this forum, from the different workshops, give us a clear way ahead. Part of this way, an important element is to join the Convention on Cybercrime, because in criminal justice matters, we have to work based on legal frameworks. And the Convention on Cybercrime provides such a legal framework for domestic action and for international cooperation. For that, for joining the convention, for implementing it, unless you're already there, we need champions. We need some individuals that take this forward and push the agenda domestically. We need champions in the law enforcement authorities. We need champions also in civil society. We need champions in legislative assemblies in order to carry this forward. This is a complex process to put legislation in place, and even more complex than to apply it and cooperate in practice. So we count on all of you in this forum to be such champions. And we are on our side from the Council of Europe prepared, and I'm sure our partners feel the same and are committed to do the same, to support you through different capacity building programs. I come away personally from this forum with the determination to seek additional resources so that we can support all the countries that are participating in this event in the necessary capacity building efforts, not as recipients, not coming to you and tell you what to do, but as partners, partners in cooperation. There's a lot of expertise in this room, and we can perhaps provide the resources for each of you, for all of you to share your experience, your expertise with others. Before I come to some thanks, and actually you already preempted some of the thanks to my own team, I have a few admin messages. Lunch will be ready the moment we finish here, so no delay there. The buses will then leave back to the hotels at 1:45, so a bit ahead of time, but with the traffic you will still be late. What? No, 1:45, it was changed, I thought. So after your lunch, the buses will be ready, in short. So try to be ready by 1:45, and hopefully the buses will be there. We'll make an effort. And then this evening, the buses leave from the hotels at 6:30. Sorry, I get conflicting messages now from the rooms. 6. Okay, the buses leave from the hotel at 6 to go to the Legislative Assembly, where we will have a wonderful reception this evening. So 6 o'clock, be ready from the hotels to go to the Legislative Assembly. Bring your, exactly, don't come in shorts, that's the first message. Be respectful. It's a wonderful building, the Legislative Assembly, so respect it. Bring your badge, otherwise you may not be allowed in. No, you will not be allowed in. It's not a may. You will not be allowed in, so bring your badge. Okay, so now loads of thanks, but I will keep it short still. Thanks in particular to our Costa Rican counterparts that they have really gone out of their way to ensuring the organization of this meeting. Some key people in the Office of the Prosecutor General that are standing there in the background, they have been essential in making this happen. So thanks to all of you to come to this wonderful country, to permit us to come to this wonderful country of Costa Rica for this great event. And we have another one coming tomorrow. Thank you also on my behalf to my own team. They have already received a symbol of appreciation, but they have really gone out of their way. They've worked very hard to bring us all here. So Catalina, everyone in the team, but Catalina is the Napoleon of that team. So, so convey the thanks. to your army in a way. It's a peaceful army in this case. Thanks to all of the participants, because you also are all very busy people. You have gone out of your way to come here to contribute to this forum, and many of you will continue also to this tomorrow. Again, take the results from this event and run with them. We can support you in that. Thank you also to all our partners from the US Department of Justice, Interpol, GFCE, OAS, and many others that have been working with us for many years. It's not sort of a one-day get-together. We are cooperating systematically over the years, and we will so in the future. For those of you who are leaving tonight or before the forum tomorrow, safe travels. We will stay in touch. Safe travels, stay healthy, and also continue cooperating with us. And that's it for us. Thank you also to Interpol for contributing the music to this event. Okay, enjoy lunch. Hasta la vista.